Not all heroes start with a sword, a spell, or a prophecy. Some start with nothing. In every story, we're used to seeing heroes who begin with great power. Warriors, wizards, and legends, all destined for greatness. But what about the underdogs? The ones who have nothing, who are written off before they even begin. These are the stories of anime protagonists who started as weak, vulnerable individuals, but grew into some of the strongest figures the world has ever seen. These aren't your typical power fantasies. These are stories of survival, of resilience, and most importantly, of growth. They teach us that strength isn't always something you're born with. Sometimes it's something you develop through hardship, through consistent failure, and through the will to never give up. And that, my friends, is the true heart of a hero. Take Mob Psycho 100, for example. Mob is a young boy with enormous psychic power, but here's the thing. Mob doesn't want to be the strongest. In fact, he fears his power. His biggest struggle isn't with physical strength, it's with his emotions. Mob's greatest fear is losing control, hurting people he loves, and becoming something monstrous. But that very fear, his vulnerability, is what makes him powerful. His strength lies in his emotional growth, in learning how to control his powers and stay human, despite the overwhelming abilities that he holds. Mob teaches us that true power isn't always about being the strongest. It's about being able to control yourself when the world seems to push you beyond your limits. Then there's Deku, the guy from My Hero Academia who wasn't born with any special powers in a world where everyone else had them. He could have thrown in the towel, stayed in the background, and watched others chase their dreams, but instead, he grabbed a notebook and filled it with the quirks of every hero, pushing himself harder than anyone around him. When he finally inherited All Might's power, it wasn't about luck, it was about Deku proving he was willing to do whatever it took to be great. His real strength doesn't come from the power he inherited, it comes from the drive in his heart, his determination, and his ability to face every challenge head on, no matter how tough things get. Deku teaches us that strength isn't just about what you were born with, but the work you put in when no one is watching. Next up, we have Usopp from One Piece. Now, Usopp might not seem like much at first. He's a liar, a coward, and he's consistently the target of ridicule. He tells stories about being a great warrior, but deep down, everybody knows he's far from it. However, what sets Usopp apart is the way he turns those lies into something real. Usopp's dreams, once seen as ridiculous, become his reality because he dares to believe in them. And it's his determination, his courage to face impossible odds that makes him one of the bravest members of the Straw Hat Pirates. Usopp's strength comes from his imagination and his ability to turn even his most ridiculous lies into truth. In the end, he proves that bravery doesn't mean not being afraid, it means moving forward despite the fear. Now let's talk about Subaru from ReZero. Subaru is the definition of an underdog. He doesn't have any special powers, and he isn't the smartest or the fastest. In fact, he's trapped in a cycle where he dies over and over, only to relive his failures. The emotional toll is crushing, yet he keeps coming back. Every time Subaru dies, he remembers it. Every loss, every mistake, every heartbreak stays with him. But instead of succumbing to despair, he rises again. His strength doesn't come from avoiding death. It comes from enduring it, learning from it, and still pushing forward. Subaru shows us that strength is about more than just overcoming obstacles. It's about the courage to keep going when everything seems impossible. Asta from Black Clover was born in a world where magic is everything. He's powerless, while everyone else seems to have magical abilities that make them special. But Asta doesn't care about that. He trains, he works hard, and when he's faced with the harsh realities of a magical world, he rises to the challenge. Asta doesn't have magic, but what he does have is an unbreakable will. His strength comes from never backing down, from fighting with everything he's got, no matter how hopeless it seems. Asta proves that you don't need magic. You don't need the perfect power. You just need the drive to keep going and never give up. Take Simone from Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. Simone starts as a boy with no leadership skills, no power, and no hope. But with every challenge he faces, he digs deeper, not just physically, but emotionally. The more he believes in his cause, the stronger he becomes. What makes Simone powerful isn't his strength, it's his belief. A belief that no matter how tough life gets, no matter how deep the hole he's in, he can climb out. Simone shows us that strength comes from belief in something greater than yourself. When you believe, you dig deeper, and that's how you change the world. Then there's Shinji from Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you've ever seen the show, you know Shinji isn't your typical hero. In fact, he's the opposite. He's reluctant, insecure, and constantly doubting himself. He doesn't want to be in the robot. He doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want the responsibility that comes with being a hero. But despite all his doubts and fears, Shinji still gets in that robot time and time again. He fights not because he wants to, but because he has to. His true strength isn't in his bravery, it's in his ability to keep pushing forward, even when every fiber of his being tells him to quit. Shinji teaches us that courage doesn't always mean charging into battle without fear. Sometimes, courage is about getting up and continuing, even when it feels like you're drowning in your own doubts. And that, in itself, is a kind of strength. Now, Thorfinn from Vinland Saga shows us a different kind of strength. For most of his life, Thorfinn is driven by hatred and revenge. After his father's death, he's consumed by the need for vengeance against the man who killed him. His entire life becomes a quest for retribution, but the more he chases his revenge, the more he loses. He loses his childhood, his humanity, and the person he could have been. It's not until later in his journey that Thorfinn learns that true strength isn't in holding on to hatred, it's in letting go of it. Forgiving and finding peace within yourself. Thorfinn's strength comes from choosing a different path, one of growth, self-awareness, and finding inner peace. He shows us that sometimes the greatest act of strength is to release the anger and hate that hold us back, and choose peace instead. So why does all this matter? Why do all these stories of so-called weak characters matter so much? The truth is, they're not just about fictional heroes. They're about all of us. These aren't power fantasies. These are survival stories. These are stories of kids who become kings, of broken boys who stood back up after they fell. They show us that weakness is not something to be ashamed of. It's simply a place to start. These characters don't have it easy. They struggle, they face adversity, failure, and fear. But they rise again and again, and through that rise, they become the strongest versions of themselves. The very thing that seems to be their weakness, whether it's lack of power, emotional turmoil, or doubt, becomes the thing that defines them, strengthens them, and ultimately makes them victorious. The journey from weak to strong isn't always smooth. Sometimes it takes pain, setbacks, and a whole lot of internal struggle. But what matters is that they never stop. They never give up. And that's why their stories resonate so deeply with us. We all have something that makes us feel weak, something we struggle with. But these characters remind us that strength can come from the most unexpected places. So, next time you see a weak protagonist, don't laugh, don't dismiss them, respect them, because one day those underdogs might just be the ones who carry the world. They might be the ones to rise above, to inspire, and to show us that strength isn't just about how much power you have, it's about how much heart, determination, and courage you bring to the fight. Each of these characters began as someone we might have overlooked, but through their struggles, their willpower, and their choices, they became far more than anyone expected. So next time you come across a seemingly weak protagonist, they're not weak at all. They're just waiting for their moment to shine. And when they do, it'll be because they've turned their struggles into strength. And I'll catch you next time.